How can investigators avoid leading questions? Imagine you're in a situation where you need to gather accurate information, but the way you ask your questions could influence the answers. This is a common challenge investigators face, and it's crucial to get it right. First, let's talk about suggestive questions. These are questions that nudge the respondent towards a specific answer. For example, don't you agree that the suspect was at the scene of the crime? This type of question is leading because it suggests what the investigator wants to hear. Instead, ask a neutral question like, was the suspect at the scene of the crime? Another type of leading question is the presuppositional question. This assumes something is true and asks the respondent to agree or disagree. For instance, since you were a witness to the crime, you must have seen the perpetrator's face. This question presumes the respondent saw the perpetrator, which might not be the case. A better approach would be to ask, did you see the perpetrator's face? Complex leading questions are also problematic. These are questions that combine multiple questions into one, making it hard for the respondent to give a clear answer. For example, do you think the crime was premeditated and involved multiple people? This should be split into two separate questions. Do you think the crime was premeditated? And do you think it involved multiple people? Direct implication questions are another type to avoid. These questions imply a condition and ask the respondent to consider an action based on that condition. For instance, if you saw the crime, would you be able to describe the perpetrator? This implies that the respondent saw the crime, which may not be true. A more neutral question would be, did you see the crime? If so, can you describe the perpetrator? When asking questions, it's also important to avoid making assumptions. For example, have you stopped committing this crime? Assumes the respondent was committing the crime in the first place. A better question would be, have you ever committed this crime? Additionally, avoid leading with a biased statement before the question. For instance, we have new evidence that suggests the suspect was involved. How do you think this evidence affects the case? This should be rephrased to simply, how do you think this evidence affects the case? During the questioning process, it's vital to remain silent during pauses and use simple sounds to encourage the respondent to continue. Avoid giving feedback that could influence the respondent's answers. For example, don't say, that's what other witnesses reported, as this could make the respondent doubt their own memory or change their account. Finally, always ask one question at a time. Asking multiple questions at once can confuse the respondent and lead to inaccurate answers. By following these guidelines, investigators can ensure they gather reliable and unbiased information.